in supply chain now.
That's right. And that's what this series is all about, right? Today we've got 4 stories teed up, recent developments, important developments, and we're going to walk through that based on some other great reporting and then give you our take on what may be the most important things to know about these developments. So all about supply chain buzz. So stay tuned, as we like to say, for a very informative, lively, interactive discussion where we'll incorporate our audience as well, where our aim is singular. We're looking to increase your supply chain leadership IQ. Right, Greg?
Indeed.
All right. So before we get started, a quick programming note. If you like the live stream, be sure to check out our podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we published our third installment of a 4-episode series with Sarah Barnes Humphrey, right?
Yeah. We were talking about talent.
That's right.
In that one, right? We had the live stream last week where we reviewed the first couple episodes and previewed the coming episodes. This is one of those that we previewed. And as Sarah said, she posted on LinkedIn, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, Scott. She said she may or may not have slightly challenged HR professionals.
We had a lively and frank conversation. Yeah. We all have room for improvement. And certainly if we're not challenging folks, then we're not having the conversations we need to move the industry forward. So, hey, real quick, before we talk about this day in history, want to give a shout out to some folks. Kathy Morrow Robertson, who is following along to some degree on LinkedIn. I bet she is conducting some analysis. And if you haven't checked out the logistics trends and insights, they've got a great newsletter chock full of industry insights. So looking forward to Kathy's going to be on that Future of Supply Chain panel event this coming Thursday, Greg. Kathy
is doing research, and under her voice, she's about to say, hush.
Always to Greg, though. Always to
Greg. I love that she's even listening to us. I feel like we've made it when Kathy's at least listening to us.
All right, Brian Birdsong, a UPSer, is tuned in via LinkedIn Live. I know UPS has been doing a lot of great things during these challenging times. Joseph Valentine, it's Valentine's Day every day. I think is either Joseph or our friend Tom said that.
On Valentine, that's right.
And Kyle Reeves, who has been really active both in the live stream on social media. Great to have all of you as part of today's Supply Chain Buzz. So, with no further ado.
That's Greg, right. Let's make it worth their while. Tell them a little bit about this day in history.
This day in history, it is already May 11th. So, on this date, Greg, in 1858, Minnesota was admitted to the United States as the 32nd state, the land of 10,000 lakes. But what I hear, there's a lot more than 10,000 lakes.
Than that. Yeah.
So this picture here, so this is one of the landmarks in Minnesota. Believe it or not, this is in Minnesota. It's on Lake Superior. This is the Split Rock Lighthouse. It's on the north shore of Lake Superior in Silver Bay, Minnesota. This was completed in 1910, 5 years after a spat where a storm claimed 29 ships in 1905. And much to some people's surprise, perhaps, there's still a ton of shipping activity on the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
Over 160 million tons of cargo, in fact, are still moved through the region. That supports 329,000 jobs in the U.S. and Canada. Does that sound about right to you, Greg?
It's an impressive number. I don't know the numbers, but having lived up there, I lived in Detroit for a while as a kid, and then having worked with a lot of companies up there, Wausau Paper and Mills Fleet Farm and Quality Farm and Fleet. I've been all over the Great Lakes up there, and of course they go out. So many of them connect with the Hudson River, and that's how so many bits of goods get to the Midwest. Right.
That's right. Of course, Chicago is another great supply chain city.
Yep.
All right. So Sylvia, speaking of harbors and sea cargo shipping, Sylvia says greetings from Charleston, where they've seen a lot of growth in that port as well, and deepening. Our friend Memory, one of our live stream thought leaders, really.
Man, what time is it in South Africa? Sorry, Siri's about to tell me, actually. It is 6:05 p.m., in case you're wondering.
6:05
She's working late today. Thank you, Memory, for working late.
That's right. And she says hello from Johannesburg. So great to have you back, Memory. All right, so driving right along. See if I've got our graphic teed up here. So AI, of course, is all the rage these days, right? It's going to be more prevalent in 2020 than ever before. On this date in 1997, Deep Blue defeats Gary Kasparov in the last game of the rematch. So the IBM supercomputer that everybody, especially if you grew up in the 90s, you knew what Deep Blue was. It wasn't just a rock and roll group. It became the first device to beat a world champion chess player in classic match format.
Mm-hmm.
So a little backstory there. Deep Blue lost to Kasparov in 1996, but the IBM team came in and they really upped the ante and rebuilt the computer. In fact, unofficially, it was known as Deeper Blue for the rematch in 97. And it came back armed to the teeth and beat Gary Kasparov. And he was none too pleased. There was a lot of images. This one came from Reuters of the match itself, but there's lots of images where Mr. Kasparov was not happy. But the robots are coming. They're already here. Right, Greg?
One of the greatest minds of the planet ever, and certainly the greatest chess player of his time, at the very least, maybe ever. Kind of a John Henry story, if you think about it, Scott, right? Mm-hmm. John Henry and the steam engine.
Yep.
Driving spikes on the railroad. And, this happened over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So those of you clinging to your spreadsheets and manual processes and paperwork, let it go.
That's right.
This man is much, much smarter and more trained, highly trained at his gifts than any of us have been. And he eventually lost to the machine. So
that's a great point there. Great point, Greg. Real quick, Nathan has been to Duluth, Minnesota. Beautiful place. Nathan is tuned in via LinkedIn Live today. Michael Masindi, I may have gotten that wrong, Michael, but glad to have you. Greetings from Kenya. Michael, great to have you here. And let's see here. I think we got one more story for today in history. It's always fascinating to take a look back, right? So today, in 1998, a French mint produced the first coins of Europe's single currency, the euro.
Wow.
So do you happen to know, and you know what, I meant to Google this morning before we went live. I checked it out yesterday. Do you happen to know the current exchange rate of the U.S. dollar to the European euro?
Hey, Siri.
Sorry.
I don't.
Siri to the rescue. So yesterday it was $1 was worth about $1.08. $1.08
euro.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
That was yesterday, so not sure what the rates are today, but interesting enough. All right, so also May 11th is celebrated as National Technology Day in India, which, believe it or not, that National Day in India is tied to 5 successful nuclear tests that took place in 1998, where the holiday traces its history to. Vietnam. It's Vietnam Human Rights Day, which dates back to 1994. And with all that being said, Greg, let's dive into the buzz. What you think?
Let's do that. Yeah. Let's talk about PMI. So we're not going to open with good news, folks, but hey, sometimes you got to face the hard truths, right?
That's right. That's right.
And I think it's important for us to know where we stand as we go through this difficult time. So forgive me while I look down a little bit at my notes here, but the PMI contracted 7.6 percentage points. This is from March to April to 41.5%, the lowest indicator in the manufacturing sector or of manufacturing contraction since 2009. This is, by the way, the PMI is put out by the Institute for Supply Management, formerly the I can't remember what the name of the organization was before, but it merged with another. So remember, PMI over 50% means growth, under 50% means decline, right? So new orders posted a 15.1% decline to 27.1%. Again, lowest reading since 2008. And the largest 1 month drop recorded since 1951. In case you don't know, that was almost 70 years ago. I can do that. I mean, when you put it in that perspective, that's pretty substantial. Also remember that in 1951, we were coming off production from transitioning from the war effort to building all kinds of cars and bikes and buildings and whatnot for people coming back from the war effort to get back to work. So there was a completely different reason for that drop then, right. and not as negative an indicator to the economy as it is now.
Yep.
So, obviously there's been a big drop here, and Scott, thank you, has added this graphic here that shows the dip in China, the lighter blue, and then ultimately the dip that has followed or is following in the States. So whether we'll see that level of depth, we reported on the dip in China some weeks back. But this is the bullwhip effect, right? This is the effect of demand declining, production declining, and then of course supply declining on the backside of that. So we're starting to see some impacts of the bullwhip effect there. Some segments did actually increase. Food and beverage and paper products were the only ones out of 18 manufacturing industries that ISM tracks that showed growth in April.
Yep.
So
memory says that, Greg, you are a encyclopedia of information.
Some might say a font of useless knowledge, but I studied history.
Hey, what was your favorite? And so I'm sure we both used encyclopedias back in the day before the internet was around. For us, it was Encyclopedia Britannica. I think my grandparents gave us a couple of editions of that. What did you use growing up?
It was Encyclopedia Britannica. So when I was a kid, we all lived, my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents all lived on 3 houses on 2 lots in Wichita, Kansas. And all that stuff was in one house because, we weren't wealthy. So we often pooled our money to buy stuff, and it always wound up in my great-grandparents' house. And so we did have an Encyclopedia Britannica that belonged to the whole family.
Love that. Wichita
being the air. People would come door to door and sell it to you.
The air capital of the world, Wichita, Kansas. Good stuff there.
1917 South Washington, in case you're wondering.
Okay.
You can drive by and see my homestead.
All right. So anything else related to this first story that you want to share?
I think the indicators are showing that we can expect a continued downward trend for a period of time. The truth is, in my opinion, I always like to qualify that we will start to see this come out as the restrictions on this seismic societal disruption, thank you again to Brad Jacobs for that term, as we start to see the restrictions easing and people getting back to commerce in the various states and municipalities as they start to bring industry back online. I can tell you here in Georgia, and particularly on Saturday, as we were driving around, my wife said, this looks like any other Saturday. Traffic and transport and parking lots are starting to fill up. Interesting and different. Everyone is wearing masks and everyone is maintaining social distance. And I applaud them for that, but it's interesting to see how commerce can come back. And frankly, I think the retailers in Georgia, at least the ones that I've seen, they're doing the right thing, restaurants and whatnot. So anyway, we won't see this turn around until we turn the economy back on.
Yeah, great point. Hey, I want to shout out to a couple folks. So Claudia Freed is tuned in via LinkedIn Live.
Thank goodness. It feels like we're alone out here. If we don't have Kathy Roberson, we don't have Memory, and we don't have Claudia.
That's right. Good point. So Claudia, I hope you're doing well. Also, Joseph Moretta, who's with Zebra Technologies.
Yeah.
He's an active participant. And, going back to Joseph Valentine, I didn't pick this up on the first couple of shows he joined us for. He is in the world of reverse logistics. So, Joseph, here's a challenge for you. I would love to get, that's speaking of challenging components of global supply chain right now, reverse logistics and returns processing, that's always complex, right? But in this environment, it's even more complex. So would love to get your insights there, Joseph Valentine, a couple of observations from what's going on in the reverse logistics space. That'd be great. All right, so let's keep driving. This next story So
this is the question on so many people's mind. Insert product here, right? Toilet paper, paper towels.
That's right.
Clorox wipes. Yeah.
So, Greg, this comes to us from Sharon Turlip over at the Wall Street Journal. So what do Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, accurate forecasts, and disinfectant wipes all have in common?
Nobody's ever seen them.
They're all rumored to exist. That's right. So kidding aside, so I think, most of the country here in the States, at least, we have seen, toilet paper, being able to find that a little bit easier. You can even find some hand sanitizer more, at least, than you could, a month or so ago. Not always, but more than what you could a little while back. But disinfectant wipes still have been really tough to find. So why exactly is that? So in this great article from the Wall Street Journal, they identify, as any of our listeners may connect with from our previous shows, demand is still a huge juggernaut, right? So take a look at Clorox, one of the leading manufacturers of disinfectant wipes in the industry. The company has increased production of disinfectant products by a whopping 40%. That's massive, given their footprint. But sales of the same products have increased to 5 times the normal level at times during this pandemic environment. So according to Nielsen, right,
that's the same 500%. I mean,
it's unbelievable,
right? That is an unbelievable uplift.
Yep. So according to Nielsen, the same folks that measure all kinds of things, including television ratings, U.S. sales of disinfectant wipes were up 146% for the 8-week period that ended March 25th, 2020. So even when, to your point earlier, we're seeing some little bit sense of normalcy kind of creep back in, still wipes are going off the charts. And really, we can expect that probably for months to come. More on that in just a second. So that level of demand, whether it's toilet paper, whether it's wipes, or whether it's meat or anything else, that's really difficult to plan for, especially in industries that typically this demand comes out of nowhere, right? It's not tied to anything you could forecast for, 6 months ago, even a year ago. So this article here references Clorox CFO's Kevin Jacobson, who says, quote, "We're shipping canisters of wipes every day to our customers, and within 30 to 45 minutes, they're gone from the shelves. Demand has outstripped what anybody could have imagined," end quote. That comes from the chief financial officer's office. So back to toilet paper, right? Because that was all the rage, and they're still getting some questions, and some markets haven't quite seen as much consistency as others, but we're seeing less hoarding, right? Because every American seems like it's already filled up their garage, so they can't take on anymore. It seems like, at least. And the major manufacturers also, the production gains have started to help address these gaps as well. Hand sanitizers, as we talked about, that's become a little bit more available. We've seen a lot of companies come into and start making hand sanitizer, right? That's helped out.
Scott, I'm talking to one of the owners at Granddaddy Mims, who is doing that. I'm talking to one of them tonight, so it'll be interesting to hear what they are experiencing in terms of shifting their production like that. By the way, real quick shout out to anyone who's in the wine and spirits industry. When demand is up over 40%, some of them are sacrificing fulfilling that demand to help fulfill the need for these kind of essential products. And that's a big move if you think about it. That is a give forward moment. Great point.
So why are wipes so challenging? So a couple of points here. So first off, of course, you've got to source the fabric, but more challenging, you've got to mix the fabric with the specific chemical mix that meets EPA's standards for what can be promoted as effective for knocking out SARS-CoV-2, which is what evidently is the virus that causes COVID-19. So if you're going to promote certain things that these disinfectant wipes or anything else that's disinfectant can promote, you've got to meet those certain guidelines.
So they've had to change their formula then.
I'm sure in recent,
there was no SARS-CoV-2, right? It's a new virus. So part of their production shift has not only been to increase volume, but to change their formula as well.
Well, I speak from years and years of failing chemistry class to be able to completely not be able to answer your question related to that, Greg. But I'm sure there's folks out there. That's a
Well, we
great
know who
question.
could, that's for sure, right?
That's right. So yeah, it's a great question. Have they had to update the chemical formula so that it could address COVID-19? I don't know. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Back to demand though. This article talks about how prior to the pandemic environment, only about half of American households, at least, really use regularly and purchase disinfectant wipes. So not only, of course, with the massive change, which is also reflected in sales, not only are those households buying a lot more, but you've had a lot of new customers coming to the mix, right? And that's, again, challenging to forecast. So,
well, it also changes the dynamic of production.
Yep.
You know, the lines for toilet paper, because it's a commodity, the lines for milk, eggs, bread, butter, whatnot, they are already built for high speed, high volume. The production lines for products like this, they are not built for that high level of volume, and it does put a strain on a production capacity to have to try to produce at that level. And ordinarily that growth would come over months or years, not days.
Great point. And that's where we're going. So what is Clorox, one of the leading manufacturers of disinfectant wipes? What are they doing about it? Well, they're doing a lot about it, and kudos to the whole Clorox team and their manufacturing team, their supply chain team. Of course, they were one of our award winners with the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards back in March before the world changed. But 4 things in particular. Number one, they're running plants 24/7 to increase production, 40% clearly. They're using third-party manufacturers to help increase inventory. They're ceasing production of some lines that aren't as relevant during these pandemic times that we live in, to gain that capacity for more disinfectant wipes. And fourthly, in the bigger picture, this is what one of the most interesting things about the article that I found, at least. With toilet paper, we know, anyone that knows supply chain knows that was just a temporary demand. That demand wasn't going to be around for 50 years. So it did not make sense for these paper manufacturers to go out and invest in massive new lines or new plants, because it was temporary demand, right? Well, on the other hand, Clorox believes this demand for their products for disinfectant wipes, for some reason, that's just not rolling right off the tongue here today.
Yeah. It's hard to say is why.
That's right. They're predicting this demand is going to hang around for months to come, based on how some of our cleaning behaviors are going to be changing. So they are investing in new production lines as they expect that demand to remain high. So, real interesting, the differences between products, between consumer products, between the different manufacturing rules of thumb. And I tell you again, Clorox, they are making it happen, no pun intended. So, Greg, what was your tell us, what are you thinking here?
Well, I mean, I think we need to talk to Rick McDonald, VP of Ops at Clorox, right? Who we've had on the show before. I'd be interested to see what they're doing. I hope they're trying to solve the proximate problem before they try to solve the longer term problem. And I sense that they are.
Yep.
But this is a dramatic shift in a product, again, that didn't have that level of demand. And by the way, the issues with supply, sustainable supply, at least at retail, for toilet paper and paper towels continue to exist.
Yep.
And I'm going to give all consumers a tip here, and that is a tip that I received from my local Publix grocery store chain manager here in Cobb County, Georgia.
Yep.
People are asking the store employees when the truck with particular products arrives and trying to meet the truck at the store, which is why those goods are running out in such a short period of time. Additionally, the manual processes in most grocery store chains, not Costco necessarily, but in most grocery store chains, they don't know what they have in inventory. Their systems don't yet capture that. And they also don't, in many cases, at least in the States, and this will be a literally foreign concept for most anyone outside of the States, because in Europe and Asia and the rest of the Americas, by the way, grocery retailers do know what they have, and they do have automated systems. But because we don't have automated systems, it's in my head how much I'm going to adapt to this,
Yep.
right? To go back to the Gary Kasparov and Deep Blue discussion.
All right. So I want to give a couple. So good points there. Absolutely, Greg. And there's so many different ways. It's tough to dive into a story like this that impacts a global sector of our consumer goods in 10 minutes or less. But I want to give a quick shout out to a couple folks. You can't talk about the air capital of the world without
Mohib
having.
is on, isn't he? Hey,
that's right.
When I was thinking about people that we should be seeing out there in the world, Mohib is out there.
So yes, and Mohib says, air capital of the world, converging point of global supply chain to take their maiden flights. My most favorite place in the world. So great to have you here with us once again, Professor Mohib. All right, so Nathan, Greg, you started to share, some of the substitute things you can use. Nathan also comes in, Nathan Sparks, I believe, and says, here's a substitute you can create at home during the disinfecting wipe shortage. Cut a roll of paper towels in half and add rubbing alcohol and dish detergent to the container. It's also more sustainable as you are reusing the container. Good stuff there from Nathan. Felicia, our one of our dear friends, Felicia with the Reverse Logistics Association, says you can also use water and Clorox at a ratio of 5-to-1 water to Clorox. So Felicia, hope you, Tony, and the RLA team are doing well. Looking forward to reconnecting.
Clearly, Felicia and Nathan were awake during chemistry, so I applaud them for that.
All right, unlike me, chemistry never was my strong suit. And also, Mohib says, good to join at Supply Chain Now and get my weekly dosage of supply chain buzz, entertainment, and happiness. Hey, I have to quote you on that.
I love that, man. Thank you, Mohib.
All right, let's see. We're going to keep on driving. So memory, Amanda, if you'd grab, okay, great, it's coming. All right, we got a couple of comments and questions from the audience that we'll get up on the visual here momentarily. But let's go back to story number 3, if my graphics will work here. All right, so in story number 3, we're talking potential new factories here in the U.S., right, Greg?
Yeah, so one of the big topics coming out of this is the need to reshore or nearshore, or, we've heard a lot about China +1 or China +2 in terms of production options and sourcing options, or 2+ China, whatever somebody's philosophy is. But this to me is good news. It is an active collaboration between companies like Intel, who have long since been trying to bring both their capital and their production back into the States, and Washington to start to make that happen. We've talked in previous episodes, I'll get back to the specifics about the chip makers, but we've talked in previous episodes about how we used to produce a lot of our medicines in the States, in Puerto Rico specifically. I'm going to say 51st state. I hope all my friends in Puerto Rico take that the right way. But the capabilities, the regulations, and the incentives that existed for a period of time, they lapsed, and a lot of companies moved from Puerto Rico. But the capacity and the skills still exist in Puerto Rico to be able to do that. This is another example of where they're trying to, and I think they should use Puerto Rico as a model, by the way, here. But this is another opportunity where Intel and the Department of Defense are in discussions to improve domestic sourcing for microelectronics and other related technologies. So that's from William Moss from the Department of Defense. So there are other companies, not just American companies. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, TSMC, had already been in talks with the Department of Commerce about building a factory, but hadn't made a final decision yet. So again, in an effort to at least broaden our sourcing and manufacturing capabilities, this is a good indicator. Government is a slow moving and slow turning ship, right? Glacially slow. We want them, as we've said in previous episodes, not to rush to any kind of solution. It's never good when government rushes anywhere. But but it's good to see that they have started trying to solve this problem. Another theme that we have seen among companies as well is not only trying to survive this seismic societal disruption, but also to plan for this and other risk potential or even disruptions that could be coming in the future.
Well put. Well, hopefully, we'll see. Going back to the China plus one comments you made, I had a fascinating conversation with a friend of mine that's really tuned into Central and South America and the manufacturing and all the industry down there. And he was talking about how there's a conversation brewing about how, while we know a lot of the production activities are going to stay somewhere in Asia, for those that may leave China, it may go to, Vietnam or some of those other countries over there. But he was making the case for bringing some of that industry to Central and South America.
Absolutely.
Which is that nearshoring a theme that we've all heard about, because let's face it, some of it just isn't. It's not a good fit for the mix, as you've spoken to, at length, of the labor and the workforce available here in the States. So it's going to be really interesting to see as different industries, geographic markets around the world look to vie for a piece of any of the pie that is going to be shifted to, out of China. So a lot more to come on this, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, just to be clear, by the way, Samsung already has a chip manufacturing facility in Austin, Texas. And the government is working with them, Department of Commerce, I believe. Let me check that. U.S. officials, sorry, is all they say. But they're working with them to expand that capability, and those discussions are ongoing. But if you think about it, Canada, Mexico, lots of the South American countries do have really educated and really capable workforces. I don't know how anyone knows this, but Claudia Fried, my friend, knows I'm a huge fan of Argentina. A lot of offshoring, I guess if you could even call it that. It's a long drive, but you can drive to Argentina. But a lot of the outsourcing of technology development occurs in Argentina and in Chile and in other countries around South America, Brazil as well, right? So there are opportunities right here in our part of the world to do those, to do those kinds of things. If we can't make the economics work here in the States, we can at least be associated with friendlier and closer sourcing partners.
Yep. Great points there. A lot more to come. Speaking of Claudia, so going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier about transportation schedules kind of being reevaluated and reworked.
Yep.
She weighed in that Big Lots is not revealing their delivery schedule, although folks are looking to buy garden furniture, which they've put on sale.
Hey, so that's a good point, Claudia, because Costco, my wife is very diligent. And she learned the trick from the folks at Publix, and she went to the store and said, when is it toilet paper and paper towels coming in? And they said, we don't know what is on our trucks until they arrive.
Wow.
I'm an old time retailer. Lots of people know that. I worked for an auto parts chain in the early to mid 90s. And even then we knew what was on the trucks. We knew everything that was on the shelf. So it's not because the technological capability hasn't existed for over 2 decades.
Right.
It's because they have chosen not to use it. And that is something that I'm certain Costco is a great organization. They're very highly advanced in a lot of ways. That's something that they have to be looking to resolve. They must be. If you think about companies planning to do things, I got to believe that grocery store chains, and we've talked a little bit with Mike Griswold about this. I've got to believe that grocery store chains are looking to automate stock status, what they know they hold in the stores, and how they fulfill those stores. They've got to be looking to automate that, and Costco likewise.
Yeah, great point there.
Visibility into what's coming is crucial.
Yep, great point. And I'm sure visibility will be a big part of our webinar with Mike Griswold of Gartner on May 27th. More to come on that momentarily. Hey, going back a little bit further. So Memory weighed in when we're talking about the disinfectant wipes, and as we've seen a lot of new product, from new people, new companies flood into the market. She says, hey, is there any form of regulation to ensure that the sanitizer manufacturers are actually selling standardized sanitizers. Opportunists are popping up and riding the demand wave. You're right. And just like we've all seen the stories of certain lack of quality and defective PPE equipment, which unfortunately is a huge safety issue.
Right.
I'm not sure what the EPA and other similar regulatory agencies are doing because, Greg, to your point, they're trying to act fast and move fast to meet the demand and the need, and I can respect that. However, in any agency's effort to move fast, what's getting in under the radar? I don't know. So it's a great point there for memory.
I think, look, some weeks ago, we started talking about sourcing relationships, B2B sourcing relationships. I would argue that the same applies B2C, and that is if you don't have a relationship with a company, haven't had one in the past, you have no reason to trust them now, particularly if they are a pop-up, if you will, who's just come into the market now. It's very possible that the government is trying to keep up. It's unlikely, however, that they are able to.
Yep. Claudia just shared, and I think she may be referring to Unilever here, but UL is making specs available for free. I'm assuming she's
Underwriters Laboratories.
Oh,
that's the people who make sure stuff is safe, at least here in the States.
Greg, you are an encyclopedia of information. Holy cow. There's not an acronym you do not know. Good stuff. Claudia, thanks for sharing.
There is, because I don't remember what the T&I is in logistics T&I for Kathy. So she's still on.
Trends and Insights.
Trends and Insights. We should just call it that.
That's right. Hey, Claudia, if you can share the link
to
the news story or to the Underwriters Laboratory, and that'd be good for folks to know. All right.
Now, it may not apply to South Africa where memory is, but they probably have a similar agency.
Great point. All right. So diving back into our final story here on the supply chain buzz. So we've spoken to a wide variety of industry leaders, and a lot of them have spoken to just how tough it is to manage plants in this new environment where you've got to protect the workforce in really entirely new ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this article that comes from Jen Miller over at Supply Chain Dive, a lot of the constantly moving pieces are identified in this ongoing effort to protect the workforce. So let's keep this simple because there's a ton of issues here, but let's start with the technology side first and the technology applications first. So we all would love to have a vaccine rolled out in the weeks ahead, right? Make things a little bit easier and allow us to eliminate a large part of the threat. That's not going to happen. In fact, J.P. Gounder, VP and Principal Analyst over at Forrester, says that that's just not going to be the case. He says, quote, people need to think outside the box a little bit and use innovation to overcome this. We're unlikely to have a vaccine anytime soon, and millions of frontline workers need to keep the world moving. Companies must be proactive, end quote. Good stuff there. So the article cites one technology practice in particular that's already in place. So the wearables, that alert or buzz when folks maybe they get too close to each other, or equally as important, too close to dangerous areas or equipment, right, in these facilities. The article cites a Canadian company known as Proxy, PROXXI, was cited as already producing this type of equipment. Additionally, a company known as Halo is producing similar equipment, but their equipment has a built-in ability to offer contact tracing. And there's a lot of different opinions on this notion of contact tracing. But in this case, if an employee gets a virus, you can go back and figure out who else was exposed. So first half of this article, putting it in the bucket of the technology that's already out there and is being used and being developed and being ramped up in terms of production. But that opens up the second bucket, right? And that is employee privacy, right?
Right.
So did you know, Greg, I didn't know this, but did you know that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, certain data is protected? In fact, Bob Nichols, who's cited in the article, a partner and attorney with Bracewell LLP, says that under the ADA, quote, you can't monitor health conditions or biometric conditions of your workforce, end quote. Now, Nichols does say that may change, just like it did in March when the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission
Wow, that's a mouthful.
allowed employers to begin measuring body temperature, which was against the ADA. I didn't know that. So that begs the question: just how far will all of this movement go? Because Amazon took some flack not too long ago. In fact, we covered it here on the Buzz, I believe, where a patent that they had filed went public that allowed for wearable buzzers to communicate picking errors or productivity lapses to the employee. And there's a lot of hubbub over that. Lots of moving pieces here, undoubtedly. A lot of tough decisions that have got to be made by a bunch of smart people all around this ever evolving and moving debate. But, keeping it simple, this is the North Star. We've got to protect the supply chain workforce and take care of the folks that keep the global economy moving and keep us consumers with stuff full in the pantries and things we need, right?
We do. A lot of what you're referring to is covered in some part by HIPAA, HIPAA, here in the States, which means that your medical records are your own, and you must give permission for anyone to access those. I could see this being tied into that somehow. So early on, I worked with a company called Henry Schein, which is a big healthcare distributor. And at the time, they had human healthcare. Now, not as much. Dental. They have dental, but at the time, they had medical healthcare entities as well, and that was a major issue. That right to privacy of your own body is really, really important. And what you must sacrifice for the greater good of humankind is going to be a long, drawn out debate. At the same time, anything that you consent to expose to anyone, or any entity, of course, you have the right to do that as well.
Right. Sure.
And like GDPR, which is a European, sharing of your personal web data, basically, let's just say, you have the right to determine what of that you want to share and for a particular time period. So perhaps there's a way to solve it in a similar fashion.
Yeah. A lot more folks are going to weigh in here. We're going to see some precedents be made and some lines in the sand certainly be drawn. It's fascinating to see just how far technology has evolved, and that's a good thing, right? Because we have options that we can, innovative options that we can apply to take care of this very valuable workforce. Look, these men and women are extremely courageous. They're jumping into their truck cabs. They're picking things at fulfillment centers. The rise of e-commerce, which was taking place long before this pandemic environment, is on steroids now. And these folks they're going into these meat plants, which we've seen some, be taken offline because of some of the spread. These are folks that are just so critical to keep, protecting the psyche of global consumers, and all the more reason to make sure we protect the workforce.
Can I say also that I think we need to put this in some sort of perspective, and that is, there are a lot of other illnesses out there that could have a similar effect. For instance, in the States, since March 1, 4.882 million people have been tested for COVID-19, and about 17% of those people have actually had a positive test. So remember, the tests here in the States are limited to people with a sufficient, at least right now, with a sufficient number of symptoms to be suspected to have COVID-19. And even those people, only 17% of them have COVID-19. That means 83% of them have something else that approximates the conditions, the symptoms of COVID-19. So it's not as if you don't have COVID-19, you're necessarily healthy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. In fact, I think we should be equally as concerned about things like pneumonia and things like that, which are commonly pneumonia and flu, even the common cold, which is also a coronavirus, are commonly transmitted through the workplace.
Yeah.
And we had just started to reach a point where people were saying, if you're sick, stay home. Right.
Yep.
And now that we have that recognition in the workplace, this or some semblance of this gives us the ability to protect those who are healthy, and also identify, maybe only for that person, those who are ill, so that they don't further contaminate themselves or the rest of the workforce.
Yeah.
That's a critical part of protecting the workforce, Scott.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, what's also interesting, and we didn't tee it up today, maybe we'll tee it up for next week, related to the vaccine. When that is eventually, and I think Johnson & Johnson's been taking the lead on that, and they've had some early breakthroughs, but when that's ready, just like we're still struggling to get enough tests available, we need a lot more needles. There was a story floating across the wire this weekend. I think our good friend down in Florida, Mr. Ben, I think he was reporting he picked up on it, because it's not just going to be a magic wand that poof, everybody's immunized. There's a process, a big process, and it's going to be a huge demand. So lots of stuff to track here, right?
Well, I, for one, am not waiting for a medical solution. We haven't cured the common cold.
Yep.
Also a coronavirus. We haven't cured the flu, and the flu mutates every year. We still haven't eliminated pneumonia. So I don't think there's any reason to necessarily believe that we will cure this. I think we all hope so, but I think we've all got to face the possibility that may not happen, and this might be something that we live with for a long, long time. And as I said, it's 17% of the illnesses that mimic the kind of symptoms that coronavirus does. So there is clearly a lot more out there that we need to be concerned about. And somehow we were living with those things threatening us as well. So we've got to start to, in our mind, think about life beyond this lockdown without a cure, or antidote, or whatever. Sorry.
All right.
But I think we need to start thinking about that possibility, and what you've just described there is a helping hand for all of those illnesses that allow us to get back to work and to remain more healthy, because a lot of people die of pneumonia every year. More have died this year of pneumonia, at least in the States, by a good measure, than have died of COVID-19.
Yep. All right. So Nathan Sparks on LinkedIn says, quote, privacy and safety trade-offs surely will bring important ethics issues that legal and corporate compliance groups will need to address. So
undoubtedly.
Back to Costco visibility, he continues. I suspect they are not telling their employees delivery info, so to limit risk and compromise behavior within the store employees and customers. Good stuff there. And memory along the lines of things that may be overlooked right now. She says another disease being overlooked right now is tuberculosis.
Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
All right. So, good, lot of stories going on here today. Busy time in supply chain as always. Claudia, looks like Claudia and Amanda just found the link for the Underwriter Laboratories information, so they put that in the LinkedIn feed.
Awesome.
Are you going to be putting that? Okay, that's going to hit all 5 social feeds. So good stuff there. All right. So moving right along, we've got some interesting events coming up, right, Greg?
Yes, and a lot more fun than talking about this stuff, right?
Well,
it's all necessary, but not that much fun, really.
It is. Well, it is necessary, and there's a lot of information out there, a lot of smart people on all sides of this ongoing discussion, and it's it's still unprecedented, right? And there are folks hurting economically, which is really important for us to think about, and there's folks hurting from a healthcare standpoint, and so we just weigh in and report what we see, and kind of give you our spin. So, but to your point,
this is a lot more fun.
All right. So coming up, again, one of our 0.5% of our content is Supply Chain Trivia Night, where we're trying to give folks an avenue to de-stress and reconnect with some of their supply chain practitioners globally. So our next round 2, which you didn't have to be a part of the first one to participate in this next
Yes, that's
round,
right? It's a new game. It's a new world.
It is
right?
May 13th.
You don't have to have watched season 1 to watch season 2. It's not like The Sopranos or Ozark.
You hop right in. That's right.
That's right.
May 13th, 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Supply Chain Trivia Night. Join us, come win, and take our money. I think first prize gets $200 again, $200 gift card. This gentleman here, Greg, tell us about the current champ.
Demetrios is sort of like a WWE fighter with a mask on. So he played the whole game as Mr. Inventory and then only revealed himself in the last moments after he overtook the virtually wire-to-wire leader, Chris Gaffney, who's Chief Supply Chain Officer at Coca-Cola. I know you're coming back, Chris. And after he overtook Angie Reno and Sarah Barnes Humphrey and Peter Heflin and Jonathan Townsley and and Claudia, as a matter of fact, of other strong contenders.
That's
so
right.
I feel like there might be a little bit of a grudge match effect here. And I know that there are people coming after Demetrius.
Yes. All right. So join us May 13th, 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We're coming out bigger and better. So we're not going to be moving as fast. We had a challenge with the delay since it was a live stream.
Yes.
So we're going to slow down a bit, have a few less questions, but have plenty of time for folks to answer the questions. So register. You don't have to, but it helps if you register because we're going to be sending out some instructions the day before at supplychainnowradio.com. Now, real quick, Greg, we need to recognize a member of our team, but also who has her own entrepreneurial venture called Made to Bloom. So Michelle Bartlett Yarbrough weighs in. Good reminder to remember that other issues are going on. So absolutely, Michelle. But she is celebrating a 2-year anniversary of her entrepreneurial venture Made to Bloom today. So,
whoa!
How
did we miss that in this day in history?
That's right. That's a good point. So from all of us, Michelle, we've enjoyed collaborating from Modex to a lot of other projects, initiatives. You bring so much to the table, and congrats on your business that continues to grow, Made to Bloom. Let's make sure we get a link so we can share that with folks. Okay. So we've got 2 other quick resources that are coming up. We want to make sure are front and center for any of our listeners. The first is, so have you had a chance to even think about the upcoming challenge that will be the 2020 hurricane season? That was not on my radar until I reconnected with Risk Pulse and Resilience 360.
We're piling one ordinary disruption on top of a completely unexpected and frankly self-inflicted disruption. And we have used, and so many other people have used, the term unprecedented.
Right.
This is undoubtedly unprecedented. I think from my perspective, the benefit that we have here is this is something we expect in the southeastern U.S. and the Gulf Coast every year. So we are equipped to deal with it. And by the way, I think the provisions that government and retailers and distribution and consumers as well have made for this season are a great model for the possibility of other significant seismic disruptions. So, but yeah, these 2 companies, Risk Pulse and Resilience 360, they've been in the forefront. We actually met with David Schillingford.
You got it.
Their chairman at Modex, the last trade show to go on.
That's right.
And he had led a panel there and continues to lead the 4 in terms of helping people to understand the risk. And both of these companies, they are the technology behind so many of the technologies out there that help predict disruptions in the supply chain. And this is a valuable service that they're offering, and I'm thankful to them for sharing this out there. These are basically the Weather Channel, in a way, of supply chain.
That's right. Thousands and thousands of data points that their team has crunched and overlaid that across the busiest and most vital seaports and airports to help provide some proactive data and insights that global supply chain leaders and practitioners really need to consider, because this, as Greg mentioned, this is going to be a very unique tropical season. So check out that webinar they've got coming up on May 14th, just a couple days from now, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Good stuff there. And you know, we make it easy. We've included the direct link to register, which it is a complimentary webinar, but you still have to register. We've put that in the show notes of each of the, if you're listening to us on Facebook, on YouTube, or on LinkedIn, you can register directly from this, the show notes. Okay, and then, Greg, moving right along, one final resource to share with folks is our webinar we have with Mike Griswold with Gartner on May 27th, which is going to be a little bit broader, right?
Right.
Where, you know, each year they come out with the Gartner Supply Chain Top 25 rankings, where they crunch data on about 300 global enterprises. And their key takeaways and common threads from all of this exhaustive research always is very informational and actionable for business leaders of just about any type business, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. And look, if you listen to us all the time, and so many of you do, don't miss it. There's so much we need to learn to help better supply chain to solve or prevent the issues that we're facing right now. And as I always say, Mike is a practitioner first. He's an analyst second. He has, I think we've agreed to say, over 2 decades of experience.
Right.
A lot of information, and of course, he's dedicated his life now to researching and assessing and improving supply chains for particularly retail companies, but companies, brand companies of all sorts.
Yeah,
they have an enhanced corporate responsibility metric, environmental and societal governance, ESG, that they've tagged it, that is even a greater standard than typical what's called CSR. And that goes into the supply chain top 25. And we expect a significant shuffling of the top 25 because of that this year. Some companies will score fairly high, and some may score nothing at all, depending on, I mean, these are high standards of ethicality and sustainability in supply chain.
Yep. All coming to you by Mike Griswold, who always delivers, as Greg mentions. The guy is just a walking, well, him and Greg, walking encyclopedias of insights and best practices and perspective. Okay, so that's May 27th, a few weeks out, at 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time. So join us for that. You can find that direct link on this live stream or at supplychainnow.radio.com. All right, Greg, we covered a lot. I showed 58 minutes and 24 seconds. That's right. You know, as we close here, and thanks to all of the audience for weighing in and the questions and the insights, the comments. Really, that's what makes these live streams so rewarding for Greg and I and the whole team here. But Greg, if there's one or two things that folks really need to, and Reader's Digest version really needs to focus on and take away from this, at least this edition of the Supply Chain Buzz, what would that be?
I think we all need to face the fact that whether we feel comfortable doing it or not, we are going to get back to business. So we need to figure out a way to get comfortable with that. We need to be explicit with our employers and business partners in what we determine as comfort in terms of renewing business. We all have to acknowledge that that particularly here in the States, that every single penny that is being doled out to a company here in the States is not coming from your fellow taxpayers. It's not coming from your U.S. government. It's coming directly from China, buying U.S. bonds, and the trillions and trillions of dollars of additional debt that we are literally taking directly from China, and we need to acknowledge and start to figure out how to solve that problem, because having China more over our head is not going to bode well for us in the future.
Yeah, great point. You know, somewhat along those lines, I think we as supply chain leaders and business leaders, we've got to look or start to put our eye on what's coming next, right? There's no shortage of challenges. We're just talking about hurricane season. It is so difficult, and we get it. It's so difficult to start thinking about that when we're still, working our
Dealing
way
with this,
through.
right?
That's right. But
Yeah.
we've got to do it. We've got to take our medicine, no pun intended, because organizations and the markets, we better off if we can really jump into proactively, some of the challenges we know are around the corner, so that we can be better prepared for the challenges that we don't know are right around the corner. So, and hopefully these resources that we just walked through, the trivia game is, hey, look, that's for camaraderie and kindred spirits and de-stressing activities. But the webinars do offer great avenues for proactively looking at, what's just around that proverbial corner. So there's no time like the present, right?
Scott, you made a quote some weeks back. If your job is to eat frogs, eat your frogs in the morning. Do it first thing and get it over with. This culture, part of the culture of supply chain, has been to sort of kick the can down the road. That's a U.S. term for not deal with hard problems. Right. Kick the can down the road on risk management, on single sourcing, on sourcing through unfriendly empires, whatever you want to call them. And one of the things I would encourage people to do is starting right now, right, on whatever it is. Eat your frogs in the morning. Stop kicking the can down the road, whatever you call it, wherever you're from. Start recognizing where you're doing that and start ending that practice right now.
Good stuff. And with that, we're going to close. Hey, thanks for tuning in today for the Supply Chain Buzz. If there's something you're looking for at supplychainnowradio.com, you can't quite find it, or if there's something that we shared today and you can't quite find it, shoot a note to Amanda at supplychainnowradio.com. She can also help you if you're interested in the Supply Chain Now platform. So check that out. Hey, there are certainly, absolutely, and sooner than we know, brighter days lying ahead. Thanks for joining us here on Supply Chain Now on behalf of Greg White and Scott Luton, our whole team. Hope you have a wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.